Welcome to the Solemn Yu-Gi-Oh channel where we discuss everything collecting and investing in Yu-Gi-Oh! Today we talk about the Power 5. Now this is a concept that isn't as, famous in Yu-Gi-Oh! As Power 9 or anything like that in Magic. Not even close, If you Google it, there's an old Reddit thread where someone mentions it. There's maybe some Pojo threads where someone mentions it. There was recently this video about the history of Yu-Gi-Oh's meta that mentions it. I'll show you right now.
What ended up being far more impactful was the decision to limit the previously mentioned Power 5 Magic cards.
Do go check out that channel. I put them somewhere in the description, like it was a really interesting watch. But it isn't really as huge because, these cards have been reprinted, some of them have been banned, and so you didn't have that long-lasting impact on the game. However, from an iconic perspective, these are some of the most well-known cards, and from a player perspective, maybe hated or loved. And so, because they're not monsters, it's not as obvious, it's not as sexy to some, but if you love Yu-Gi-Oh! History, these cards should awaken something inside you. So let's go over that, right? These 5 cards would be considered a Power 5. Now, there are other super powerful cards, and we'll get to that as well, but these would be the ones. If we look at a Pot of Greed, I don't think anyone needs an introduction here. It is the most memed Magic card in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! Everyone, what does it do? You have Pot of Greed in every episode of GX. I activate the spell card, Pot of Greed, allows me to draw 2 cards every time. Even now it's banned because of how powerful it is. And whenever a card does something similar to it, there's now a huge cost to it. Pot of Extravagance, Pot of Desires, Pot of this, Pot of that. There's all these pots and they'll never be as good as Pot of Greed because there's no cost. You just turn 1 card into 2. And since in Yu-Gi-Oh! There's not something like mana or such restrictions, those 2 cards instantly turn into more. And so in GOAT, you play GOAT, you draw this, cool. Your win rate just skyrocketed because of how impactful that is. Ever since then, it's been banned purely because of how good it is. It is that good of a card. I don't think it'll come back ever. And so yeah, this is iconic. The only thing holding this card back is that it's a rare. And so obviously LOB packs are rising, LOB boxes are rising. So this card rises as well. But, when you open 2 boxes of LOB, and again, you might have to sell 2 Teslas for that, but when you open such box, your odds of pulling this are pretty good. And when it comes to Ultras, your odds are pretty shit. So that's holding it kind of back. The fact it's also not full foil, but you gotta respect the history. And it is in LOB. It is in the first set. If you want to expose yourself to LOB, to its magnificent power, let's say, as the first set, this might be a card for you because it's rare. Like, it's probably the best rare you can own, in my opinion. Now, next up, let's talk about Dark Hole. This, in my opinion, is probably the weakest in the Power 5. And some people would probably argue that you should replace this with maybe Graceful Charity. Now, what's holding Graceful Charity back is that it's a starter deck Pegasus card, and so, you don't have that chase really. It's also not as iconic. Came up a few times, but never, never Pot of Greed kind of times. Still, that didn't stop it from getting banned because of how good it really was, together with Pot of Greed in GOAT format as well. But this thing is iconic. It's a super from LOB, wipes the entire board. It was banned for a long time. It's definitely rare. Every kid knew it because it was also part of the starter decks. So I'm not saying it should go off, but it's definitely not as impactful and insane as the other cards on this list. For that reason, it's also still pretty cheap. So again, some people say like, I'm priced out of vintage Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, not necessarily, yeah, you're priced out of Blue Eyes maybe, but there's still cards like these. But once again, look at that iconic art. That, beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Next up, we go to Raigeki. Now, I'm pretty sad this one is in a BGS case because, I'm a PSA fanboy, and when the rest of your collection is in PSA cases, it's just odd to have like these BGS ones. My biggest issue really is that like they float inside this case, and if you like tap them real hard, the card will like go to the bottom, and I don't know, it's not for me. But there's definitely, pros to BGS as well. This is not me knocking one company or the other. It's just a personal thing. Once again, Raigeki, back in the day you play this, wipe their board. End of story. Absolutely broken. These days, that's not as big of a deal, and so it's not banned anymore as far as I'm aware, unlike Pot of Greed and Change of Heart, which will probably never come back. But back in the day, wow, blowing up someone's field is just absolute insanity. Now you have all this anti-destruction, but back then you didn't. I believe this is like the 3rd most expensive one on the Power 5, so maybe this is out of your range by now, possible, but still an absolute beauty of a card. I'm very happy to have it, though I would have loved to have a PSA 9 instead. Next up, now this is a fun one, we have our Change of Heart. What's weird is everything in the Power 5 is LOB. And then we have this one random Metal Raiders card. Now, it's definitely not random. Like, look at this beautiful art. And of course, it's absolutely insane effect. Just stealing a monster was insane back then. It's still insane right now. Again, they printed a card like Triple Tactics Talents that copied a Pot of Greed sometimes. It also copied a Change of Heart sometimes. But worse, it's not a forever steal. But so yeah, this is the one MRD card on this list. A lot of people are priced of this one by now. It's an Ultra, so very hard to pull out of the second set ever. I think it's a bit odd, however, that, you know, everything in here is LOB and then this is not. But I do get it because this is so much more powerful than these two. And, you know, what would you even put as the fifth one in LOB? You know, it would have to be like, what, polymerization or whatever? I don't think so. So this makes a lot of sense. I'm definitely not knocking it. I love this card. If anything, this is probably my second favorite as far as art goes in this set right here. I currently have another one being graded. It's just very, very exciting to me. What a beauty. And then finally, we have the big hitter. This is my favorite art in, you know, this Power 5 video. A Monster Reborn LOB. First edition. Monster Reborn is a funny one. It got banned, it got unbanned. It's a very powerful effect. Right now, it's still powerful and played in some decks, but it's not as insane anymore as back in the day. It is an Ultra, it is an LOB, so that makes it incredibly hard to pull. And you know, a lot of people have memories towards a few Magic cards. Not many, but a few. You know, Dark Hole definitely comes to mind, but then this one also comes to mind. Look at that foil. Oh my god. So yeah, because of this is an Ultra and Change of Heart is an Ultra, these are definitely the most expensive in the set, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're the strongest, you know. If Pot of Greed was an Ultra, I think the conversation would be very different, because Pot of Greed is just more powerful than these two in very weird ways. But because it's a rare, it's more common, you know, than these Ultras, and so that's holding it down a bit. But still, iconic, amazing, beautiful card. But price-wise, it doesn't come close to Monster Reborn. I think everyone remembers watching the anime and Yu-Gi going activate Monster Reborn, bringing back some amazing card. And so that rounds out the Power 5. Now, do I think this should ever reach Power 9 prices? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And even if these go up, you know, the Power 9s will probably have gone up more. The reason for that is that these are reserved lists. And so Power is not only a collector's item, it's also a game piece. Now, I will say, the formats where they're played in are basically dead. Like, you have maybe a locals that's still playing these formats, but most people don't, because they quite frankly don't have access to it. And so if you haven't played a format for 7 years, you're like, you know what, I don't have to play it. But regardless, you know, if those prices in MTG were to go down, you would have players picking them up instantly for a variety of decks. Whereas here, you know, you need a GOAT format Pot of Greed. You're not gonna buy the LOB PSA 10. You're just gonna buy some starter deck, cheapest Pot of Greed kind of card you can get. Not starter deck, the Legendary Duelist or whatever, the secret rare. That's what I did. And so, you know, as collector's items, these are major. Do I think longer term they can still go up? Absolutely. And there's no financial advice, it's just my personal opinion. But yeah, I do feel Magic cards as a whole are underappreciated. Because, you know, monsters are just hype. But if you look at Yu-Gi-Oh's history, what has more impact? Was it Time Wizard or was it one of these bad boys? I would say it's one of these bad boys. Now, of course, Time Wizard, awesome card, love it. It's an Ultra, harder to pull. You gotta factor in all of those things. But these are just very interesting cards to me. I honestly wish I had 10s in these, but I don't. And I can't be bothered picking up a 10 Monster Reborn by now. That would probably cost me an arm and a leg. I don't even think anyone's selling these for very, very good reason. So yeah, absolutely beautiful. Now, one thing people argue, and I actually kind of agree, is that you can expand the Power 5 list with other cards from Magic Ruler. And then we get into stuff like Delinquent Duo, Painful Choice, Forceful Sentry, Confiscation, some of the most broken cards from Magic Ruler and basically from all Magic and or spell cards, right? And I feel you. I think you could definitely make an argument that your Power 5 is the ones we just discussed, and that you then go, you know what, our Power 9 or 10 is, you know, adding the Magic Ruler broken pieces to them. And yeah, you could. In GOAT format, we know how broken this card is. I feel like if you in GOAT draw Graceful Charity, Pot of Greed, or this, you already know, like, I might just win. But I do not think these cards have the same iconic weight as these, because these are anime cards. People grew up on these. People saw these in their starter decks as well. Not all of them, but like a couple of them. These are the originals. These, you know, hold so much more of that vintage power beyond the player base. Because, you know, if you look at Delinquent Duo, it's really a player card, right? Like, this was never a, wow, the anime showed this and it was so cool card. This was, wow, as a player, you feared this card. And that has value. There are player collectors, but the market shrinks a little. Regardless, there's definitely an argument there. Love this card. Love Painful Choice, Confiscation, Forceful Sentry. I do think this one's art is the coolest. Like, the other ones are just like people, and it's not as hype. Regardless, that is all. Hope you found it interesting. Like, subscribe, and I will see you soon. Ciao.